Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. For those who don't know me, my name is Mary Booth, and I manage the Center for the Study of International Slavery. This year, we're marking 20 years of research excellence for the Center, a unique and thriving partnership between National Museums Liverpool, specifically the International Slavery Museum, and the University of Liverpool. To mark this milestone, we're hosting a series of programs, workshops, consultations, and consultancies using this anniversary to not just celebrate the past 2 decades, but to critically reflect and prepare for the next. So we thank you all for being part of that ongoing conversation. Today, we're thrilled to host our annual book talk in partnership with Liverpool University Press. As partners on the Liverpool Studies in International Slavery series, they share a goal of reaching across the humanities and social sciences to build critical perspectives on slavery and its enduring legacies. By adopting international and interdisciplinary approaches, the series explores the origins, practices, and aftermath of slavery across different societies. And tonight's featured publication is truly at the forefront of this work. So I'm delighted to introduce the editors of the timely Breaking Dead Silence, Dr. Christina Horvath and Dr. Richard White. Dr. Christina Horvath is a reader in French politics at the University of Bath. Her research engages with agonistic approaches to the legacies of transatlantic slavery in Western Europe and the Caribbean. And her most recent work focuses on decolonizing heritage narratives in green spaces and botany. She has been researching Bath's links with transatlantic slavery since 2016. Dr. Richard White is a visiting research fellow in the School of Art, Film, and Media at Bath Spa University. As an artist researcher, he is interested in movement, heritage, and social justice. His emergent practice involves non-confrontational, co-creative disturbances to authorized heritage narratives, attending to reluctance, absence, and presence. And today I am truly honored to say we have a very special guest in the audience. Professor Alan Rice is joining us. He is a contributor to the edited collection, and he has been a longtime partner and friend of the Center for the Study of International Slavery. So we're thrilled to have you here, and we are graced that he will also be contributing. So I'd like to read a bit about Dr. Rice as well. So Dr. Rice is a professor in English and American Studies at the University of Central Lancashire, Preston. He's the co-director of the Institute for Black Atlantic Research, or IBAR, and director of the UCLan Lancashire Research Center in Migration, Diaspora, and Exile, MIDEX. He has worked on the interdisciplinary study of the Black Atlantic, publishing Radical Narratives of the Black Atlantic in 2003, and Creating Memorials, Building Identities, The Politics of Memory in the Black Atlantic in 2010. He is a founder member of the Slave Trade Arts Memorial Project in Lancaster, which was responsible for unveiling a memorial commemorating victims of the slave trade in 2005. So I will shortly pass the floor for our presentations for the book. That'll be followed by a Q&A, and then we will end the evening with a book signing hosted by Liverpool University Press. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speakers.
We're going to take it in turns. We've kind of got a bit that Christina's prepared and a bit that I've prepared, and we kind of put it together at the end.
And we will also let Alan talk. Yes, so hi everyone. We are delighted to be here. This is also kind of a historic moment because that's the first time that Alan and Richard first met in person. So to tell you that this is a project that happened a lot under COVID or started under COVID, and some of it happened online more than in person. So I'm just checking how it works, and it works fine. So my part is also the introduction. So this talk will be about the book, but not only about what is in the book. So what is in the book is available for free download. It's in open access, but also available here at the special read tonight. So we would like to add some updates. So I would like to talk you through how the book happened. So what was the context of this dead silence that the title refers to, some of the making of the book, and then I will start talking a bit about what happened since, and Richard will also add his thoughts and some of his ongoing projects to this before he concludes. And I will also conclude a little bit because we are different voices and we are not in full agreement about what is happening or what has happened. And this is also a kind of really interesting time to look back at things now, 2 years after. So, I'm sure that you are familiar with the geography of Bath and Bristol. So Bristol has a lot in common with Liverpool in that it is known for having functioned as a slavery port for an extended amount of time. And Bath is this leisure city which functioned as a spa location and which was also crucial in allowing people who made money through the slave trade to mingle with other important people in Britain and share the power. So Bath has a different history, but it's little known for these connections, and today is very much a city for tourism, and this is not the connections with the Atlantic trade doesn't occupy a very large part is in what is put forward for tourist consummation. Sorry, I have to click on mine and on this as well. Would you mind clicking for me? So I just... So Bath is also a UNESCO-listed city, and maybe you might not know that it's double-listed. So it is listed as part of World Heritage and also as one of the 11 great spa towns of Europe. And on the UNESCO website, it is described in these terms that Bath reflects two great eras in human history, the Roman and the Georgian era. And I always found this revolting that these great eras are two eras which practiced slavery, and yet they are recognized by UNESCO as being some of the greatest eras in human history. And very much of Bath's memoryscape is ruled by what we called the dead silence. So this is a term we borrowed to Jane Austen, who mentioned this term in Mansfield Park, where a conversation about the slave trade is shut down by the dead silence, and we felt that this was a very suited title because we felt that much of it is still covered by this dead silence, and so since 2016 we have been fighting against the dead silence separately and somehow allied forces to create this book to bring the dead silence down, and that was to some extent possible because the book is here, but then not fully, and we will explain this a bit more in detail. So we felt that this amnesia has big consequences, and namely, or you can maybe pass the next, and the next. This amnesia has great consequences because that means that there is a lack of diversity, like some voices are missing from what is showcased in museums and what is best known about the city's history and memory. And that also means that some people whose histories and memories are not remembered cannot properly feel to belong to the community, to the national community. Next slide. So an example of the dead silence is that there have been moments of awakening which didn't definitely change the narrative, and one of these, so the silence started to crackle a bit in Bristol around 1999, and then even more in 2007, where a number of exhibitions were sponsored by the government for to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the trade. And so there were various museums in Bath, so in Bristol obviously, but also in Bath, which remembered some aspects of the city's connection with that transatlantic trade. And these were completely covered in oblivion a couple of years later. So we have a chapter on the Holborn Museum where one of our co-authors had a role in changing the narrative about a ledger book. And when she started doing her research, she realized that there were exhibitions before, but nobody really remembered these. Historian Oliver Totel said about this that there are tensions between museums' commitment to present a plurality of voices and conflict avoidance. So on purpose, they try to create unity rather than allow dissonant voices to speak. Next. Previous. Sorry. So 2020 happened and brought a number of changes. There was the big moment of the toppling of the Colston statue in Bristol, which came through this emotion that followed the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests, which happened in this vacuum created by the COVID-19 lockdown. And after this, there was a new impetus, and museums and other institutions were somehow forced to engage with the history more. Next. So it is in this context that we have started making this book, and our main aim was somehow to keep this moment in memory and bring together voices that were not so obvious to hear, and promote something that I would call, with my colleague Anna Bols and Hansen's words, a radical multi-perspectivism. So the possibility to hear several voices without having to bring them into a consensus, but allow different people to display different narratives and open a dialogue. And so this is what the book tried to achieve. So we combined projects that were happening, and that included some of the projects that I was involved in, and also some projects that Richard was involved in, and some projects we were both involved in. Next. So the book starts with an introduction that somehow tries to chart what was happening before, and this is what I call an agonistic memory framework. So I have another book that came out, another collective book that I edited called Pathways to Agonism, and this agonism would be a third way. So it would be not a cosmopolitan and not an antagonistic memory framework, but a way of remembering which doesn't try to achieve consensus, but lives in the dissensus. And this dissensus, or the kind of multiple voices speaking, was achieved before 2020 already through various practices, and that includes radical walking practices in Bath and Bristol, of which Richard here is an example. And also curatorial practices, which we have seen through the exhibitions that I listed in the previous slides, and also co-creation and collective action that I've been involved in, and I will try to show some images of this. Next. Yes, so the first one of these is the anti-mapper that happened in 2017 in a conference, which was a starting conference of a project on co-creation, and we had a walk with Richard, and then we collaged into the official Bath tourist map some alternative stories, and we called this an anti-mapper workshop. That was in 2017 in September, and then in September 2019 we had an international group So some local artists and people and some visitors from Mexico and Brazil. And we visited lots of local museums. We also had some work with Richard, and then we had a collage workshop in which we collaged into some teacup contours which we borrowed from the Holborn Museum, and then we tried to make slavery visible in the public space by painting a graffiti, which was not really possible in a city where everything is Georgian and grade 1 or 2 listed. So we painted on canvas. And then the next year, I started a project with students. So we have these vertically integrated projects at the University of Bath where students from various levels can collaborate on a research project. And they signed up to create a walk of slavery and abolition in Bath, which is called Bath's Uncomfortable Past. And they created a map and a walking tour. And they also created an event, which was the launch event. And since COVID happened at that moment and people had nothing better to do, we had like some 300 people listening to that talk, which already brought together Richard, Alan, me, and some other people who are also in the book. And so that gave somehow the idea that we could prolongate this and we could recruit some other people we knew, some from the museum, some from the civil sector, so civil society groups, and African descendant activists and other voices. And then some other projects happened. So after that, I went on to work through Bath's connections with other former colonies, so Barbados and Jamaica in particular. And we did some art workshops there. And we tried to use plants as a medium to explore memory and remembrance and these difficult stories through the plant connections. So that was a sort of oblique way to open conversations about identity and slavery and so on. Richard will talk about what he has been involved in since, and also I think that he also has a slide which tackles a bit how the official narratives have changed or not in Bath. So we cannot say that nobody has reacted. So museums and the National Trust, Bath Abbey, Beckford's Tower, the Assembly Rooms, the Holborn Museum, they all did something in terms of issuing mission statements on their websites, recognizing links to slavery. They all took it seriously to recruit PhD students from Caribbean heritage in many cases to engage them in research projects. They did reinterpretations, temporary exhibitions. The Holborn Museum also did a reinterpretation of this ledger book that is discussed in one of the chapters of the book, but they also invited artists, including Lubina Himed, and Alberta Whittle was maybe the artist who the most engaged with the museum's collection. So she was already known from the Venice Biennale, and she brought some of her work from the Venice Biennale, which is these ladies in red called Lagaret. And then she created several figures of limbo dancers, and the exhibition was called Dipping Below a Waxing Moon, the Dance Claims Us for Release, which is a title, a part of a poem that she wrote. And there were some spillouts of the exhibition in town, so some of the posters, like this one, My Body is Electric, were visible in different parts of the city, in bus stops and other places. So it was not only in the museum. Okay, so I'm on time. Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you to. Yes, that's not very professional. Okay, and the next one, and the next one. Next one. So this we are on now. This is So there were in this exhibition various references to the permanent collection, for example, to this work by Wedgwood, which is very well known, and also you can see the hand, the detail of the China hand, which not only evokes China pottery, but also the name of the Lassell and Balls families that owned who were the grandparents of the art collector William Holborn, and who had the plantation where this ledger book that I showed before came from. Next. And so this also raises the question of to what extent artists who accept these invitations to museums to help them decolonize their collections, like Alberto Vittel in this case, and some other artists, some other post-colonial voices, because I think there is an ongoing commitment in the Holborn Museum to showcase such artists. And we can see that this is also a national trend, and one prominent example is the Hulock exhibition at the British Museum, What Have We Here, in which he also created a response to all this colonial history, in which the British Museum was not only a participant, but one of the leading actors. So in these cases, there is a potential to open dialogue and bring in another voice, but there is, like in the case of Hulock, we could really feel that there was a two-voice narrative in the museum. There were different labels, yellow labels to give a voice to the artist, and white labels to have the museum's voice. And the critical voice more was the artist's voice, and the museum voice was less openly critical and openly decolonial. And so the artists asked openly or explicitly in the exhibition to what extent artists are also co-opted in this situation, and to what extent can the artist's commitment replace the museum's commitment, or what is the museum really doing when the artist has this space, but this is a temporary space, and we can walk back from this anytime. Next. I have some partial conclusions also from this other book, which is called Pathways to Agonism, in which, in a different context from different projects, we came to the conclusion that there is, to change narratives, we have to find allies, and these alliances are necessary between institutions who have more power to legitimize heritage, dissonance, but they also have more cautious approaches and more stakeholders to keep happy. And more radical voices who are often the artists, the academics, or the civil society groups. So we feel that agonism needs these allies, these alliances, and also some favorable ground to develop on. So places where there is a higher level of mnemonic security, an active civil society, and the democratic institutions. But the main contribution is to reopen these symbolic spaces in which more complex and alternative ways of remembering can take place. And I think that this is where I will hand over to Richard.
Okay. That's fine, thank you. All right. So I'm just going to skip this on a bit. So we've got, so we've got there's some kind of conclusions there that we might kind of come back to, which comes out of Christina's piece. Now, is that going to go forward or backwards? That's right. Okay. So here we are. This is my bit. what I wanted to begin with really is to, the book has many, many different voices, and 19 different voices, all speaking in different ways as a kind of this sort of snapshot response to the aftermath. Really, it's the aftermath, although it was the aftermath of a racist murder, it's kind of the aftermath in Bristol and Bath of the toppling of the Colston statue. And my experience of that, if you check out the chapter that I wrote, is, so suddenly all these places that we were trying to get a foot in the door, all these museums that we, wanted to say, come on, you should start acknowledging this stuff. Suddenly, come and be on this Zoom, come and be in this discussion panel, come and do this, come do that. And there was a kind of an opening, and my experience of that opening, as I'll go through in a moment, is that it was rather short-lived. So I'm kind of coming at this as though there's I can do the academic stuff, but really this is about my practice as a walking artist, and maybe memory activist. I don't know, that was one of the ones that sort of came along. But we should begin with some acknowledgements. So it's acknowledging that we here in Liverpool are in a city where, the blood of many people and people who were captured and enslaved and shipped across the Atlantic, the blood of many other people kind of just feels like it kind of runs through the veins of the city. I've spent the day walking and just noticing what gets acknowledged and what doesn't get acknowledged, and some of it does and some of it doesn't. What I think I would like to acknowledge is our ancestors, the voices that we have yet to hear, the voices that we're beginning to find a way of hearing, which is part of my practice, and to acknowledge myself as a white person, as someone who has had a very privileged life, continues to have a very privileged life, at the expense of a lot of other stuff. And that kind of, the story of race, I think, kind of runs through this. So 6 years later, after that racist murder in the States and that kind of amazing worldwide response in the Black Lives Matter movement, and 2 years after publication, it's great to be here, but I'm curious 2 years later. It's fascinating. So it's like, did we not sell very many books, or is it particularly poignant now, or what? So those are kind of questions that just sort of float for me out there somewhere. But the thing is that I found, so people do want to know about this. People still want to know about this, even if the door has been kicked shut a bit. People still do want to know. So then what happened? So I'm going to say a bit about then what happened, and I'll kind of open up really the question of does this publication have any relevance at all? So Christina's talked about breaking the dead silence in Bath, and we've had some great examples of that, and I've heard some and read about great examples in Liverpool. My experience, and it was already there in the period of time when we wrote the book, was that I could see the resilience of that dead silence popping up in many different ways. So just as this is kind of a few examples. So the World Heritage Sites, the UNESCO people, lots of important academic people from Bath University and Bath Spa University, all take part in it, but they kind of just let it go. So they've got this little shop in Bath where you can go. And first of all, there was nothing. And then there were, I should have got photographs before. This paragraph has been drafted and redrafted and redrafted. I was in Bath about a month ago, and I could see through the window it was still there. I couldn't check the words. But, it's like about as anodyne as you can get. So this is the Bath World Heritage kind of organisation, the representatives of UNESCO in this great World Heritage Site, and this is the best they can come up with. And one of the designations is about this Bath as this sort of pinnacle of knowledge of Georgian, all that kind of stuff. Bath Abbey ran an amazing exhibition that now kind of is on a website if you go looking for it. You have to go looking for it. It doesn't get you there. The Holborn, so the whole great chapter in the book from Jill Sutherland, which tells the story, and I urge you to read between the lines, of her trying to kind of bring to fruition a project about the ledger book, which takes you back to the source of the wealth of the Holborn Museum, completely unacknowledged until that point. And even now, if you go to the Holborn, there isn't a plaque there. There's nothing that tells you in your face as you come in the door. So it's all there, but you've got to dig with it. Dig for it. It's deep in their website. Beckford's Tower, so Beckford, third, if not fourth generation slave owner, and for a long time, barely any kind of reference to that, even though the curator knows the story well and tries to insert it whenever she can. So that's changed. There's a new display up there. I suspect it was the National Lottery kind of pushing that agenda along, not the nice white people that run Bath Preservation Society. The problem, and it's the problem you may well have experienced, if you go to a National Trust property that's actually starting to talk about where the money came from, the room volunteers often will either be, they really want to talk about it because they feel that they can't, or there will be people who want to kind of get that bit of the story over and then talk about the nice wallpaper or the artwork in this case. So this isn't National Trust, but it's the same story. So the reluctance and the silence, that white silence of the volunteers is a real problem. For my part, I was doing work in Sydney Gardens on this sort of botany and empire kind of stuff, and one of the things that I was invited to do was on the International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its Abolition, UNESCO designated day. Bath had never done anything at all. Out of the blue, I was invited. Would I host a commemorative walk? Yeah, sure I would. So we did a commemorative walk, and lots of people came, all the rest of it. So that was in August of 2021, it's all MP was there, all the great and good wanted to be seen to be there, and they haven't done. I've never been invited to do it again. They've never done anything again since then. And in the October of that year, having negotiated to do a walk as a sort of Victorian kind of spectacle, having done that at the Sydney Gardens, I was informed by the organisers that the content of the walk was inappropriate for such a celebratory occasion. And really that's kind of, I talk about that in the chapter, but that's my experience of the resilience of the dead silence. I want to make a big jump, I, as part of the research that I was doing, I managed to get onto a scholarship in South Australia, and I came across this building in the Botanic Gardens, because that's what I was doing, sort of botany and empire kind of stuff. This building in the Botanic Gardens, and they called it the Dead House. And I was just absolutely fascinated about it. My kind of journey there was, part of the deal was that I was going to host a walk. So I was sort of doing a bit of research for the book. It's a long story that we won't have time to get to, but there is a series of connections between Bristol, well, you know there are connections between Bristol and Liverpool, but the connections took me by the SS Great Britain to South Australia, looking for the history of these inbred families keeping the wealth in, and following the story of the compensation money. So if I can do this really quickly. So very quickly, this guy, he was the grandson of a slave owner, and that slave owner had raped his mother. So this guy's of mixed heritage. And he managed to get all these positions up there. And his first act as a member of the South Australia Assembly was to pass the South Australia Anatomy Act, which was an act which said that any Aboriginal person who died in the custody of the state, taking it broadly, so lots of Aboriginal people were sent off to lunatic asylums and they're put into prison and beaten up by the police and all of that kind of stuff. And they all, when they died, became the property of the state. So he was very interested, well, actively involved in hospital stuff. He was a surgeon. He was involved in setting up the South Australia Museum, all of these kind of ties. And he was in cahoots with this guy, William Ramsay Smith, who had a kind of similar background, but much more hands-on. And what I discovered was that in this house, this guy was defleshing Aboriginal bodies, shipping them back. Both he was doing it independently, but with the academic kind of respectability of Stirling, shipping them out to Europe, shipping these bones out to Europe. Sometimes just the heads, sometimes bits of bones. And I was just, it seemed to me, this is about, you know, can it get any worse? Can that kind of white supremacy get any worse? You know, the kind of that horror of it. And I found myself kind of immersed and really kind of sort of scarred by that. And so I wanted to find out more. And I discovered that whilst we were doing all the stuff that we were doing here in England, perhaps in response to the racist murder of George Floyd, perhaps in that opening, the toppling the Colston statue gave us, or what, an Aboriginal artist, Yanni Scarce, had made this installation in the dead house. And there's a video, and there's a soundscape to it, but these are like sliced open bodies. It's actually it's glass that's been kind of sliced, and it's got kind of a bit of alabaster in the glass. So she was trying to get that story out. 4 years later, looking through the slats, that's all that I could see. There was nothing there. There was no plaque on the wall. It was just the dead house. This was the morgue of the lunatic asylum in South Australia. And I'm just using it as an opportunity to kind of, on more sort of theoretical stuff that's kind of helped me get where I am, is working with Oliver Otelli's idea of reluctant sites of memory. So there are sites of memory, but there are the sites that are reluctant are the ones where they won't let you remember. It denies memory. You know, where do you go to mourn? Where do you go to learn, to understand these horrors of the past, if they're denied of you? So I've been walking around some reluctant sites of memory today, as we were talking about. Karen Till, in a similar kind of way, she talks about practices of bringing to mind wounded places, caring for wounded places. So the idea of a wounding, and that is a wounding. It's a wounding. It's a different kind of wounding, depending on your race, but it's a wounding that I feel as a white person, you know, it's stuff that I don't know. It's knowledge that has been denied me. And then all of that kind of haunting, spectres, the stuff that's, you know, both in Derrida and Fisher's work, trying to kind of bring to mind and bring alive those spectres of colonialism and a refusal to be silenced. Very briefly, that's the kind of stuff I do. It's the process, the practice, walking and asking questions. It's kind of got a link out there with the Zapatistas, that idea of making a way through asking questions. We open our way through, we find our way through asking questions. I'm really interested in the idea of mnemonic landscapes, so landscapes, buildings that kind of hold a story, and that what we can bring to that is that story, and we match that story together. And as was already said, it's about, the walking is really important. It's actually that physical engagement with the land, the feet, what's under the ground, the tactile engagement with. We were walking around earlier. We were walking around what would have been the White House for the ambassador's house for the slave-owning states had the American Civil War gone the other way. and it's still got the same wood panelling. You know, if you scratch it, I bet you could smell the cigar smoke. You know, there's something about kind of that kind of frisson that brings it alive and makes you kind of think about it. How are we doing for time?
55.
Okay. So briefly, I just want to give you an example of a kind of bit of reflection from my work. So this is what kind of evolved out of a project called Bath's Last Legal Slave Owners, and became a walking project up and down the river, the River Avon, from Avonmouth, Bristol, all the way to Bath. And the project's called Sweet Waters. I'm going to just try to play a video clip, which if...
Look at that great arrow made of journeys, that sperm of memories, from the Atlantic, from the sea to the Severn, pointing east towards London. That great arrow hidden in plain sight, pointing towards the seat of governance, the centre of empire, British bullseye. That great arrow showing the flow of wealth and power, Bristol, Bath, London, towards a palace built from Bath stone, towards a state that paid off the slave owners and never compensated the enslaved. Walking on the day Grenfell burned, and as Windrush generations are betrayed, walking with legacies of slave ownership, walking with institutional racism, walking with what was done by people like me to people like me, that great arrow pointing up the river east towards London, towards a palace built from Bath stone, transported on canals, funded by slave-generated wealth, a signpost on a trail of wealth, a trail of tears.
So if you're interested in the technology that it's all old technology, sadly, but I could tell you about it, but we won't go into it now. No, let me do that. This one. Where I want to get to is, so what kind of experience am I trying to sort of generate or to inculcate with those who choose to walk with me? Although I'm not sort of stuff it in people's faces, it is there is an agenda, and the more I think about it, the more I do it, it becomes clearer. And for what is on the whole tends to be older white walkers that I'm walking with, it is about white supremacy, it's about white silence, it's about white fragility, it's about all of that stuff. But there are stories, and what I'm trying to do is, at the very least, those who join a walk have got a story. They'll say to their mates, they'll say, "Did you know that building there? Do you know who used to live there?" You know, that sort of thing. But maybe they'll go one step further, and I hope that some, the braver ones, will become what has been described as affect aliens. It's the awkward squad. It's the people who feel empowered to ask the difficult questions. And in this context, I think Ahmed has got it right, to be thinking about histories that are kind of difficult, that things that are atrocity histories, particularly. Again, it's kind of, it's me, a white person, that histories that involved, you know, white people doing horrible stuff, like those colonial histories, the histories of those colonial atrocities. And by going back to those, and at least to begin with, to start making an acknowledgement that this stuff happened and these awful things happened, and then moving forward through apology and repair, it begins a kind of a process. And that kind of reluctance, that failure to go back to those moments, means that it's like we're treading water. You know, it's the you know, the Holborn Gallery in Museum in Bath just drives me up the wall, you know. They put on these great stuff, you know. Alberta Whittle, I cried. It was such a powerful exhibition. But you go back the following day and it's like flower arranging or something, you know. It's like it hasn't embedded itself in the culture of the workplace. This was the organisation. We had a big meeting. Sorry, I'm rant. I'll just tell you the story. We had a meeting up at Bath University where the team from the Holborn were there, and they were talking as if they had the exhibition that they put on in 2007 as if it hadn't happened. They had no institutional memory of it at all, and there was nothing that was kind of embedded. So although I'm not a great person for plaques and things, there's something about kind of getting it there, getting that acknowledgement at the very least, getting it there. Anyway, I'm coming near the end there. So this is the stuff that I think that we need to be acknowledging at the very least. So currently what I'm doing, and this is what kind of took me to Australia, interesting kind of finding connections here in Liverpool. I'm following, using kind of a walking approach, 3 dynasties of enslavers, one of which had one of their big houses in the village where I currently live, and just looking at the ways, the strategies that they did to keep that wealth within the family and then get themselves elected or getting themselves into positions of authority to keep that power within the family or for that kind of particular class section. And the consequences of that, so the erasure of cultures, the erasure of languages, epistemicide. And so as a last, so this is, when I'm walking, I use a lot of sound samples. I've started doing a whole load of stuff with popular song that seems to kind of, that's a way of engaging memory. But this is a thing that I did, I'll just play you a clip of. It's from a speech made by General Gawler, who was the 2nd governor of South Australia. And,
Love white man. Do not quarrel together. Tell other tribes to love white men. You cannot be happy. Wear clothes. Work. Be useful. Let you love God. Above all things, you cannot earn unless you love all things. Made heaven. Love white man. All things. Do not quarrel. Love white man. Tell other tribes. Do not love together. Tell other tribes to love white men. Wear clothes. Build learn to speak English. Wear clothes. Learn to tell other tribes to love white men. Wear clothes. Build.
So you get the idea. It was a speech that was translated into the language of the indigenous people, the Ghana people who lived in and around the area of Australia, South Australia. So we're kind of back here 2 years on after publication. Does the publication have any lasting relevance? Well, for me, rereading what I wrote and reading where I've been, although my first reaction was, it's that they kicked the door shut after we kind of muscled in there a bit, but they bashed the door shut. But actually, I feel that I've learned a hell of a lot from the process that set off. It wasn't starting from scratch. We're all of us in this struggle, standing on the shoulders of giants. But I learned a lot about listening, more about body work and all of that. But in particular, I learned about the land and that kind of this idea of terraforming, of shaping the land, how colonialism has shaped the land, the very land where I live, the fields that were enclosed. it's shaped the land. And more broadly, I think there are all sorts of networks that are formed, and that's kind of resonated back from some of the writers. I put this sort of question out to them. And for me, it does keep coming back to the issue of race, and it keeps coming back to the issue of white supremacy. So that's where I'm going to finish. I don't know how we want to go on from there. Questions? I don't know. Alan, you want to chip in? If we've got time, Mary, it's kind of your call, really.
If Alan wouldn't mind speaking about his chapter as well. Can I borrow your microphone? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. Can I put this on you? Is that okay?
Cheers, thank you. It seems to me that it was a really important thing for this book about Bristol and Bath, for it not to be just about Bristol and Bath, and they reached out to me in the project because I've worked on memory studies of slavery, and I'm also connected to Lancaster Black History Group, and Lancaster, where I live, formed a Black History Group in the wake of, in that 2020 period. I've been working on this stuff for years with different people, and suddenly there was this group of 15 or 20 people. And what my essay's about, really, in the collection, is how that local group managed to galvanise a whole series of actions, and the most important of which was related really to what Richard's been talking about, which is a slave trail for Lancaster, which is also digital, and which also has a kind of whole digital life where you can spot something, you can tap on it, and it will give you lots of other things. So you tap on a street name and it tells you all about what happened in the street, etc. And it seemed to be really important to us. Education seemed to be the important thing. We had primary school teachers in our group, black primary school teachers, and they became really animated by the idea that this trail, which is an adult trail, should also have a children's trail attached. And I've been taking kids out for 20 years, kind of adapting the trail. But what happened in the wake of 2020 was we actually developed a trail, and we took it out to every single primary school in Lancaster. And over the last 3 years, over 2,000 children have done the slave trail, but in the context of education packs which went out to all of the schools as well. So usually we were doing 4 or 5 weeks work and artwork as well, and then the trail was part of that. And so that makes the project kind of actually, so what happens is I'm doing something completely different, like I'm at the football, and because I support Lancaster City, obviously, and I'm at the football, and people are coming to see me. Parents come up to me going, "Oh, my son just did this," because they know me as the prof, the man with the Lancaster City scarf. Come up to me, well, and they went on your trail. They said they learnt all this stuff, and they're teaching their parents who know who this is a forgotten history of Lancaster, or has been a lot. So that's been really great. And then we, because of the work we were doing, we were invited into the museum to do a talk about black history, and I was there with a black colleague, 2 black colleagues, Geraldine and Rennie, who's a Sudanese refugee, and we're talking about the work we're doing. And at the end, the question and answer happens, and they ask, well, what should this museum do? It's the Judges' Lodgings, which at the time was the most lily-white museum you've ever seen in your life. Very nice people working there, but and I just sort of said, you've got to get some black people on the walls. thinking, that's the end of it. They go away and do anything. But they got money together and they've put black people on the walls. And the person who's painted them is a wonderful local black artist. And then she's now in all the schools doing workshops about those pictures. So I think what I want, and I wrote about this. The project wasn't fully designed then, but I wrote about this in the essay. And the reason for doing it was really just almost say, well, we can be a template for little 2-bit places which people don't really know about, which haven't really got large African Caribbean communities, that actually you can do things there. That there is nowhere where you can't do something. I think that was the important thing, and that suddenly, we now have a Lancaster Black History Group, and we're being asked to do things by different bits of the local community. When they think about something that he's doing, they'll ask us, and I think that's what I wanted to write about, was the way in which. It doesn't have to be despair. We don't have to live in that moment of, Black Lives Matter happened and then it all quietened down. That if somewhere like Lancaster it didn't quieten down, then other places it doesn't need to quieten down. And I think what it's really about is actually just kind of getting the right group of people together and making sure that you're including a large range of. It's not about the kind of just the academics and the kind of and the literati. That in fact those people at the football are going to come up to you and say, "Oh yeah, my son was out with you on your tour," and and so with actually now there's 6 or 7 people who can do that tour. I mean, so I think that's what it's about. It's about activism, and my article's really about that kind of activism as it was working in a small place, as a means of talking about the great things that Bristol and Bath are doing. Don't have to be just there, and also there are certain specifics to those places, and I wanted to talk about the specifics of a different place. So that's all I want to say, and I have I'll leave some of these here. Some of the trails and some postcards that people can pick up. Thank you.
Do you have the book with you? Yes. So I just realized that one thing that we didn't do was to go over the book and tell you what is in the book. So this is maybe on purpose, so you have to read it. But we have 3 main parts. The first part is on strategies for critical questioning of official heritage. And then we have a second part on radical multi-perspectivism in Bath and Bristol. And then we have a third part, arts-based and participatory approaches to the past. And the part 4 is comparative perspectives. So we have Alan in this section, but we also have 2 Mexican colleagues who came to do some of the workshops with us in Bath, but who they could think of a Mexican city that is also a UNESCO listed city, and so it brought up questioning of to what extent the UNESCO listing is actually almost an obstacle in the way, because it is so enshrined in memory, and also there is this massive touristification. And one thing I would like to add, so I would like to go back to that slide, the kind of conclusion slide that I didn't use. And we can maybe start the discussion around that, or more particularly, like what are the different museums doing now? Or Deb, I had this slide as well. So this is actually our biggest victory and our biggest defeat at the same time. That actually the biggest change to the official memory in Bath happened through Bridgerton. And when the book came out, I am still involved in, there's a group called BACA, which stands for Bath and Colonialism Action Group, and that brings together many of the museum people and National Trust people, but not as much as official representatives of their institutions, but more as people who come together to informally inform each other what is going on in their in their institutions, and maybe also have a sort of alliance or allyship to carry on with this agenda of trying to decolonize memoryscapes. And sometimes there is a gap between the activism of these people as private individuals and the institutional voices. That means that the same person can be also super enthusiastic about bringing these voices in, but then when it's actually happening, they have to satisfy the local audience that doesn't necessarily want to listen to this, or the visitors who come to celebrate a hen party or some private event, and they don't necessarily want to hear about slavery when they do that. And when you go, and so I have been invited to events where presenters had slides with our book on the cover, but if you go to the museums which actually have a bookshop, then you find there the collected series of all the Bridgerton books and new books that have been made on how Bridgerton was shot in Bath, but not our book. So that is like unthinkable that our book that is actually available for free download if people know about that it exists. So they could just put out a sign or just one copy and people could look for it, or at least they would know it exists. But there is this part of this institutionalized memory and this really commercial or commodified memory that is much more selling than our a bit more complex and multi-perspectivist version. So I think that this is really, so we really try to keep time so that we have space and time for discussion. Would you want to chair that, or shall we maybe just turn around our chairs and come so that we can really discuss if you want to share your own experience or ask questions? And maybe Richard, you could come, and Alan, maybe you could join